There is a moment in every human life when you begin to realize that the greatest thing standing between you and the life you could live is not always the world outside you. Sometimes it is the quiet voice inside you that has learned to doubt your own existence. You may have spent years believing that you need more confidence, more money, more recognition, more opportunities, more approval, or more proof before you can finally become the person you know you could be. You may have looked at other people and wondered why they seemed so certain while you were still questioning yourself. You may have watched someone walk boldly toward a dream while you stood at the edge of your own, wondering whether you were capable of taking the first step. But what if the power you have been waiting for has never been absent? What if it has simply been buried beneath years of hesitation, comparison, disappointment, conditioning, and the habit of asking everyone else who you are? There is something remarkable about the human mind. It can learn to survive almost anything, but sometimes in learning to survive, it also learns to become smaller. You learn to stay quiet because being honest once caused conflict. You learn not to dream too loudly because someone once laughed at your dream. You learn to hide your ambition because you were afraid of appearing arrogant. You learn to question your instincts because someone repeatedly told you that you were wrong. You learn to seek permission before trusting yourself. And eventually, you may forget that you were ever meant to trust yourself in the first place. This is why believing in yourself is not simply about repeating positive words in front of a mirror. It is not pretending that everything is perfect. It is not convincing yourself that you will never fail. It is not becoming blind to your weaknesses. Real self-belief is much deeper. It is the decision to remain connected to yourself, even when the outcome is uncertain. It is the willingness to say, I may not know exactly how this will unfold, but I am willing to discover what I am capable of. That sentence contains enormous power, because the person who believes in themselves is not necessarily the person who has no fear. It is the person who refuses to make fear the final authority over their life. You do not need to eliminate uncertainty before you move forward. You need to learn how to move while uncertainty is present. You do not need to feel confident before taking action. Often, confidence is created by taking action. You do not need to know who you will become before beginning the journey. You discover yourself through the journey. This is one of the most important truths you can learn about personal transformation. Identity is not always something you find. Sometimes, it is something you build through the choices you repeatedly make. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen your identity. Every time you speak honestly when it would be easier to hide, you strengthen your identity. Every time you continue after disappointment, you strengthen your identity. Every time you choose growth over comfort, responsibility over blame, awareness over reaction, and courage over avoidance, you send a message deep into yourself. You are teaching your mind, I can trust me, and that trust changes everything. Many people spend their lives trying to become impressive to others while secretly feeling disconnected from themselves. They collect achievements, compliments, possessions, titles, relationships, and recognition, hoping that something outside them will finally create the sense of worth they could not generate within. But external validation is unstable. One day someone praises you and you feel powerful. The next day someone criticizes you and suddenly you question everything. One day you receive attention and you feel valuable. The next day you are ignored and you wonder whether you matter. This is exhausting because your emotional stability becomes dependent on circumstances you cannot control. Self-belief begins when you stop outsourcing your sense of worth. It does not mean that other people's opinions become irrelevant. Human beings are relational. Feedback matters. Relationships matter. Learning from others matters. But there is a difference between listening to someone and surrendering your identity to them. You can receive criticism without turning it into a definition of yourself. You can receive praise without becoming dependent upon it. You can experience rejection without deciding that you are unworthy. You can fail without declaring yourself a failure. You can make a mistake without becoming the mistake. This distinction is incredibly important. Your behavior is something you can examine. Your choices are something you can improve. Your weaknesses are something you can work on. But your humanity is not something you have to earn. There is a part of you that existed before your achievements and will remain valuable beyond your failures. You were not born knowing how to doubt yourself. A child does not naturally begin life asking whether they are worthy enough to take up space. They explore, they fall, they get up, they ask questions, they try again. They are fascinated by ordinary things. They reach toward the world. Then life teaches them what is acceptable. Sometimes those lessons are helpful. Sometimes they are incomplete. Sometimes they are painful. And sometimes we carry them into adulthood without realizing that they were never universal truths. They were simply conclusions formed by a younger version of ourselves, trying to understand the world. Maybe you learned that being emotional was weakness. Maybe you learned that making mistakes was dangerous. Maybe you learned that success belonged to people who were naturally talented. Maybe you learned that you had to please everyone to be accepted. Maybe you learned that your needs were less important than everyone else's. Maybe you learned that dreaming was unrealistic. Maybe you learned to expect disappointment before allowing yourself to hope. These beliefs can become invisible architecture inside the mind. You walk through life according to structures you cannot see. You say, that is not for someone like me. But who taught you that? You say, I am just not confident. But when did you decide confidence was a personality trait rather than a skill? You say, I could never do that. But have you actually tested the limits of your ability? You say, people like me don't get opportunities like that. But is that reality, or is it an old story repeating itself? Self-awareness begins with the courage to question the stories you have inherited. Not every thought deserves to become a belief. Not every fear deserves to become a decision. Not every past experience deserves to become a prediction about your future. Your mind is constantly interpreting reality. It takes memories, emotions, expectations, and experiences and uses them to construct meaning. But interpretation is not always truth. Sometimes the mind says, this feels unfamiliar, therefore it must be dangerous. Sometimes it says, I failed before, therefore I will fail again. Sometimes it says, they rejected me, therefore I am not enough. Sometimes it says, I am afraid, therefore I should stop. But feelings are signals, not commands. Fear can tell you to pay attention without telling you to retreat. Sadness can tell you something mattered without telling you that your life is hopeless. Anger can reveal a boundary that needs examination without giving you permission to hurt someone. Uncertainty can remind you that you are entering unfamiliar territory without proving that you are incapable. Emotional intelligence is the ability to listen to your inner world without becoming controlled by every emotion that moves through it. This is where real power begins. You begin to observe yourself. You notice the thought, you notice the emotion, you notice the impulse, and instead of immediately obeying it, you create a small space between what you feel and what you choose. That space is freedom. Imagine someone criticizes you. The old version of you might immediately become defensive, but the aware version pauses. What exactly did they say? Is there something useful here? Is this criticism accurate? Does it reflect their perspective rather than my reality? What can I learn without abandoning myself? That is strength. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes strength is the calmness to examine yourself honestly. Sometimes it is admitting I was wrong. Sometimes it is saying I don't know. Sometimes it is asking for help. Sometimes it is walking away from an environment that continually pulls you away from your values. Sometimes it is staying and having the difficult conversation you have been avoiding. Believing in yourself does not mean believing that you are always right. It means believing that you are capable of facing the truth about yourself without collapsing. That is a much stronger form of confidence. Because when you trust yourself enough to confront your weaknesses stop controlling you from the shadows. You can say, I struggle with discipline, then you can build discipline. You can say, I am afraid of rejection, then you can learn to tolerate rejection. You can say, I compare myself too much, then you can examine why comparison has become important to you. You can say, I seek approval, then you can begin practicing internal validation. Awareness turns vague suffering into something you can work with. And once you can see something clearly, you can begin to change your relationship with it. There is another truth you must understand. Your hidden power is not some mysterious force that suddenly appears when you become perfect. Your hidden power is often buried inside ordinary abilities you have stopped recognizing. Your ability to adapt, your ability to learn, your ability to recover, your ability to reflect, your ability to love, your ability to begin again. Your ability to endure uncertainty without losing your humanity. Your ability to change your mind when new information appears. Your ability to forgive yourself without avoiding responsibility. Your ability to imagine something that does not yet exist. These abilities may look ordinary because you have lived with them for so long, but they are extraordinary. Think about everything you have already survived, not to glorify pain, not to convince yourself that suffering was necessary. Simply recognize the evidence. There were moments you believed you would never get through, and somehow you did. There were days when you felt lost, and eventually you found another direction. There were relationships you thought you could not release, and eventually you learned to live without them. There were mistakes that once embarrassed you deeply, and today they may simply be memories. There were problems that once looked enormous, and now you barely remember how afraid you were. Your history contains evidence that you are more adaptable than your current fear suggests. This does not mean the future will be easy. It means you are not as fragile as your doubt sometimes tells you, and that realization matters. Because self-belief grows when you stop demanding certainty from life and start developing trust in your ability to respond. You cannot control every event. You cannot control how others behave. You cannot control whether everyone understands you. You cannot control every opportunity. You cannot control the timing of every dream. But you can influence how you meet what arrives. You can choose whether you learn. You can choose whether you communicate. You can choose whether you keep going. You can choose whether you become bitter or wiser. You can choose whether disappointment closes you or teaches you. You can choose whether success makes you arrogant or grateful. You can choose whether uncertainty becomes paralysis or curiosity. This is where personal power becomes practical. Stop asking only, what will happen? Begin asking, who will I be while it happens? That question changes your relationship with life. If the answer is, I will remain honest, then you have something stable. If the answer is, I will keep learning, then failure becomes information. If the answer is, I will respect myself and others, then rejection does not have to destroy your dignity. If the answer is, I will continue to act according to my values, then external circumstances lose some of their ability to define you. Your values become an internal compass, and a compass does not remove the storm. It simply helps you remember your direction. There will be moments when you feel behind. You will look around and see people who appear to have accomplished everything you are still trying to begin. Someone will have the career you wanted. Someone will have the relationship you imagined. Someone will have the confidence you wish you had. Someone will seem further ahead. But comparison is deceptive because you are comparing your internal experience with someone else's external presentation. You know your doubts. You know your unfinished work. You know your private disappointments. You know the moments when you question yourself. You do not have access to the complete reality of another person's life. So stop using someone else's visible chapter to judge your invisible one. Your life is not late. Your growth is not invalid because it is slower than someone else's. There is no universal schedule for becoming yourself. A tree does not look at another tree and apologize for growing at a different pace. You are allowed to have your own season. You are allowed to begin again. You are allowed to change direction. You are allowed to discover that the dream you once pursued no longer represents who you are. This is something people often misunderstand about self-belief. Believing in yourself does not mean forcing yourself to continue down the same road forever. Sometimes believing in yourself means admitting that the road is wrong. Sometimes courage looks like persistence. Sometimes courage looks like letting go. The wisdom is learning the difference. If you continue only because you are afraid that changing direction means failure, you may confuse stubbornness with strength. Growth requires flexibility. You are not a statue. You are a living person. You are allowed to evolve. And evolution often feels uncomfortable because every meaningful transformation asks you to release a version of yourself that once felt familiar. There may be identities you have outgrown: the people pleaser, the perfectionist, the constant achiever, the invisible one, the rescuer, the person who always says yes, the person who never asks for help, the person who pretends not to care, the person who keeps everyone comfortable while becoming increasingly disconnected from themselves. These identities usually developed for a reason. They may have protected you once, but protection can become limitation when the circumstances change. A shield that once helped you survive can become heavy when you no longer need to carry it everywhere. This is why self-discovery requires compassion. Do not attack the older version of yourself. Understand it. Ask what it was trying to accomplish. Maybe your perfectionism was trying to protect you from criticism. Maybe your people-pleasing was trying to protect you from rejection. Maybe your emotional distance was trying to protect you from disappointment. Maybe your constant productivity was trying to protect you from feeling inadequate. When you understand the intention behind a pattern, you can change it without declaring war on yourself. You can say, "Thank you for trying to protect me. I no longer need to live this way." That is a profound form of maturity. You are not becoming a different person. You are becoming more conscious of the person you already are. And this process can be surprisingly quiet. Transformation does not always announce itself. Sometimes it appears as the moment you pause before reacting. Sometimes it is the first time you say no without explaining yourself for 20 minutes. Sometimes it is the day you stop checking whether everyone approves of your decision. Sometimes it is choosing rest without guilt. Sometimes it is admitting that you need to learn something. Sometimes it is realizing that you have been chasing a goal because you wanted to prove something rather than because you genuinely valued it. These moments may never receive applause, but they are powerful, because the deepest changes often happen before anyone else notices. Your outer life may look exactly the same while your inner relationship with yourself is changing completely. And eventually, your behavior begins to reflect that internal shift. You speak differently. You choose differently. You tolerate different things. You pursue different things. You become more selective about where your attention goes. You stop trying to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop treating every disagreement as a threat. You stop believing that being liked by everyone is the same thing as being loved. You stop confusing attention with connection. You stop confusing busyness with purpose. You stop confusing perfection with worth. And slowly, something becomes clearer. You were never meant to spend your entire life performing an acceptable version of yourself. You were meant to develop an honest relationship with your own mind, your own values, your own potential, and your own life. That relationship requires patience. You cannot build deep self-trust overnight. Trust is created through consistency. If you tell yourself you will wake up and work toward something, then do it. If you say you will stop abandoning your boundaries, practice one boundary. If you promise yourself that you will take care of your mind, protect some quiet time. If you say you will learn a skill, spend 30 minutes learning it. Do not underestimate small promises. The mind notices. Every completed promise becomes evidence. Every piece of evidence strengthens trust. And eventually you no longer need to convince yourself that you are capable. You have experienced yourself being capable. This is why action matters more than endless motivation. Motivation can inspire you, but practice transforms you. You can watch hundreds of motivational videos and still remain exactly where you are if inspiration never becomes behavior. At some point you have to stand up, send the message, start the project. Read the book, take the class, make the appointment, write the first page, have the conversation, apply for the opportunity, set the boundary, take the walk, ask the question, begin. The first step does not need to be impressive. It needs to be real. There is a dangerous misunderstanding about potential. People often imagine potential as something that guarantees future success. It does not. Potential is possibility, and possibility becomes reality through repeated action. You can have extraordinary talent and never develop it. You can have intelligence and never use it. You can have creativity and never express it. You can have compassion and never practice it. You can have a meaningful dream and never give it a chance. Potential without participation remains hypothetical. Your hidden power becomes visible when you use it. That means you do not need to wait until you feel extraordinary. Use what you have now. Start with the knowledge you have. Start with the resources you have. Start with the confidence you have. Start with the time you have. Start imperfectly. The person you become tomorrow is shaped by what you repeatedly practice today. And yes, you will fail. You will misjudge situations. You will choose poorly sometimes. You will trust the wrong person sometimes. You will procrastinate. You will lose momentum. You will doubt yourself. You will have days when the old patterns return. Do not interpret those moments as proof that you have not changed. Growth is not a straight line. A person can become healthier and still have an unhealthy day. A person can become confident and still feel insecure. A person can become emotionally intelligent and still react badly under pressure. The goal is not permanent perfection. The goal is increased awareness. How quickly do you notice? How honestly do you reflect? How responsibly do you repair? How willingly do you learn? That is growth. You do not have to become someone who never struggles. Become someone who knows how to meet struggle consciously. There is a difference between saying, "I should never feel afraid," and saying, "I can feel afraid and still choose wisely." There is a difference between saying, "I must never fail," and saying, "I can learn from failure without losing faith in myself." There is a difference between saying, "Everyone must understand me," and saying, "I can communicate clearly and accept that I cannot control every interpretation." That is emotional freedom. You stop demanding that reality behave exactly as you wish before allowing yourself to be okay. And when you develop that kind of inner stability, your ambitions become healthier. You no longer chase success simply to prove that you are worthy. You pursue meaningful goals because you have something to contribute. You no longer seek achievement as an escape from yourself. You use achievement as an expression of yourself. This distinction can transform everything. Ask yourself what you would create if you were no longer trying to impress anyone. What would you study if nobody cared whether it looked prestigious? What would you build if you knew that your worth would remain intact even if it failed? What conversation would you have if you were not obsessed with controlling the other person's reaction? What boundary would you set if you trusted yourself enough to tolerate temporary discomfort? What dream would you finally admit you still care about? These questions can reveal parts of yourself that have been waiting patiently beneath the noise. Sometimes the hidden power inside you is not ambition. Sometimes it is honesty. Sometimes it is creativity. Sometimes it is tenderness. Sometimes it is leadership. Sometimes it is the ability to bring calm into a chaotic room. Sometimes it is your ability to see patterns others overlook. Sometimes it is your ability to listen. Sometimes it is your capacity to make people feel understood. Do not limit power to dominance. Real power can be gentle. A person who can regulate themselves during conflict possesses power. A person who can listen without preparing a defense possesses power. A person who can apologize sincerely possesses power. A person who can change their mind without feeling humiliated possesses power. A person who can stand alone without becoming isolated possesses power. A person who can remain compassionate without abandoning boundaries possesses power. The strongest person in the room is not necessarily the loudest. Sometimes it is the person who has nothing to prove. And perhaps that is one of the greatest signs that you are beginning to believe in yourself. You become less interested in proving. You become more interested in living. You stop asking, "How do I look?" and begin asking, "Is this aligned with who I want to become?" You stop asking, "Will they approve?" and begin asking, Do I respect my own decision? You stop asking what if I fail and begin asking what could I learn if I try? The questions you ask shape the life you experience. A mind constantly asking, what is wrong with me, will search for evidence of deficiency. A mind asking, what can I learn about myself here, begins searching for understanding. A mind asking, why does this always happen to me, may become trapped in helplessness. A mind asking, what is within my influence right now, begins recovering agency. You cannot always choose the first thought that enters your mind, but you can become more intentional about the thoughts you repeatedly feed. Attention is a form of energy. Whatever you repeatedly focus on becomes psychologically louder. If you constantly study your failures may begin to look like your entire identity. If you constantly study your weaknesses, you may forget your strengths. If you constantly monitor other people's lives, you may lose contact with your own. If you constantly predict disaster, you may overlook possibility. This does not mean ignoring problems. It means refusing to make problems the only thing you can see. Train your attention to notice evidence of progress. Notice when you handled something better than before. Notice when you communicated more clearly. Notice when you recovered faster. Notice when you respected your boundary. Notice when you acted despite discomfort. Notice when you chose patience instead of reaction. These moments matter. Your brain learns from repetition, and every conscious choice contributes to the person you are becoming. You are shaping yourself every day, whether you realize it or not. The question is whether you are doing it intentionally. There will come a time when you realize that you have spent too much energy waiting for permission. Permission to start, permission to change, permission to be ambitious, permission to rest, permission to be different, permission to say no, permission to become someone your past self could not have imagined. You may have been waiting for someone to tell you, you are ready. But readiness is often created by beginning. Nobody can guarantee that you are ready. Life rarely gives you that kind of certainty. You step forward and the stepping forward teaches you. You speak and speaking teaches you. You practice and practice teaches you. You fail and failure teaches you. You recover and recovery teaches you. This is how hidden power becomes conscious power. You discover yourself through participation. Do not wait for the perfect version of yourself to begin. That person does not exist yet. The person you are imagining is built through the imperfect actions you are currently avoiding. Your future confidence is waiting on your present courage. Your future clarity is waiting on your present exploration. Your future strength is waiting on your present discipline. Your future freedom is waiting on your present willingness to take responsibility for what you can control. And responsibility is not punishment. Responsibility is power. When you say, my life is completely someone else's fault, you may temporarily feel relieved, but you also surrender your ability to influence what comes next. When you say, there are things that happened to me that I did not choose, and now I want to choose what I do with them, you reclaim agency. That does not mean blaming yourself for everything. It means separating what happened from what happens next. You may not control the past, but you can participate in the future. You may not control what someone did, but you can choose how you heal, what boundaries you create, and what lessons you carry forward. You may not control whether an opportunity appears, but you can prepare yourself so that when it does appear, you are ready to recognize it. Preparation is another form of self-belief. When you prepare, you are telling yourself that your future is worth investing in. Read, practice, learn, reflect, improve, rest, repeat. There is dignity in becoming better quietly. Not every improvement needs an audience. Not every victory needs to be announced. Some of the most important victories will be invisible. You will sleep better because you finally stopped fighting yourself. You will speak more honestly because you stopped fearing every reaction. You will make decisions more calmly because you know your values. You will stop chasing certain things because you understand what they were trying to give you. You will become more selective because your attention has become valuable to you. And one day you may notice that the person who once begged the world for proof has become someone who carries their own evidence. You know what you have learned. You know what you have survived. You know what you have built. You know what you are still working on. You know where you need help. You know what matters. And you no longer need to pretend to be finished. There is tremendous freedom in saying, I am still becoming, because becoming leaves room for possibility. You are not trapped inside the identity you have today. You are not permanently defined by your past. You are not required to remain loyal to beliefs that no longer serve your growth. You can learn, you can change, you can mature, you can begin again. You can become more honest, more courageous, more patient, more disciplined, more compassionate, more emotionally intelligent, more grounded, more fully yourself. But do not turn personal growth into another form of perfectionism. You do not need to optimize every minute of your existence. You do not need to become a productivity machine. You do not need to transform yourself into an ideal human being. You need to become more present with your actual life. Sometimes growth is pushing forward. Sometimes growth is slowing down. Sometimes growth is building. Sometimes growth is releasing. Sometimes growth is speaking. Sometimes growth is listening. Sometimes growth is being alone long enough to hear what you actually think. Your life needs both movement and stillness. Without stillness, you may confuse activity with direction. Without movement, insight can become another form of avoidance. The balance is important. Reflect, then act. Act, then reflect. Learn, then practice. Practice, then learn again. This is how awareness becomes wisdom, and wisdom changes the way you understand yourself. You begin to realize that you do not need to hate your old self in order to become your new self. You can appreciate the person who got you here while still choosing to become someone different. Maybe that earlier version of you was doing the best they could with what they knew. Maybe they lacked tools you have now. Maybe they misunderstood themselves. Maybe they made choices from fear. Maybe they were simply young. Whatever the reason, you can release the need to punish yourself for being human. Self-compassion is not the absence of accountability. It is the environment in which accountability becomes sustainable. You can say I made a mistake without saying I am worthless. You can say I hurt someone and choose repair without drowning in shame. You can say I wasted time and decide to use the time that remains more intentionally. You can say I was afraid and still choose courage next time. That is how the inner world becomes healthier. And when your inner world becomes healthier, your outer decisions begin to change naturally. You become less reactive. You become more thoughtful. You become less desperate for immediate results. You begin understanding that meaningful things take time. A strong character is built slowly. A healthy relationship is built slowly. Expertise is built slowly. Trust is built slowly. Self-respect is built slowly. There is no shortcut around repetition. And perhaps you have been underestimating what repeated small actions can do. One page becomes a book. One workout becomes strength. One honest conversation changes a relationship. One boundary changes a pattern. One disciplined morning becomes a routine. One courageous decision becomes evidence that you can do difficult things. Never despise the small beginning. The mind often wants dramatic transformation because dramatic transformation feels emotionally satisfying. But sustainable transformation is usually quieter. It is ordinary. It is repetitive. It is sometimes boring. And that is precisely why it works. You do not need to feel inspired every morning. You need a relationship with yourself strong enough to continue when inspiration is absent. That is discipline rooted in self-respect. You do not discipline yourself because you hate who you are. You discipline yourself because you care about who you are becoming. There is a profound difference. When you truly believe that your future matters, your present choices begin to matter differently. You become careful about what you consume mentally. You become careful about who receives your attention. You become careful about what environments shape your beliefs. You become careful about the stories you repeat, not because you are afraid of the world, because you understand that your mind is a living environment, and whatever you repeatedly place inside it will influence what grows there. Give yourself ideas that expand you. Give yourself conversations that challenge you respectfully. Give yourself silence. Give yourself books. Give yourself experiences. Give yourself honest reflection. Give yourself permission to ask difficult questions and give yourself time. You do not need to have every answer today. There is strength in uncertainty when uncertainty is approached with curiosity. I don't know yet can be a powerful sentence. It means the story is still being written. It means you are willing to learn. It means you have not closed the door. Maybe you do not know what your next career will be. Maybe you do not know what your purpose looks like. Maybe you do not know how a relationship will unfold. Maybe you do not know whether the dream will work. You can still take the next honest step. You can still learn what is learnable. You can still do what is doable. You can still become someone you respect. And perhaps that is what believing in yourself really means. Not believing that everything will work exactly as you want. Not believing that you are destined for effortless success. Not believing that you will never experience disappointment. It means believing that you are capable of meeting reality with awareness. It means believing that you can learn. It means believing that you can adapt. It means believing that your mistakes do not have to become your identity. It means believing that your voice deserves to be heard. It means believing that your dreams deserve honest examination. It means believing that your emotional world deserves understanding rather than constant suppression. It means believing that you can become more than the limits you once accepted. And there is something beautiful about realizing that the door you have been searching for may not be outside you at all. It may be the decision to stop abandoning yourself. Every time you ignore what you know is true because you are afraid of someone's reaction, you move away from yourself. Every time you betray your values for approval, you move away from yourself. Every time you silence your curiosity because you fear failure, you move away from yourself. Every time you treat yourself as incapable before you have even tried, you move away from yourself. But every time you listen inwardly with honesty, you return. Every time you act according to your values, you return. Every time you forgive yourself while remaining accountable, you return. Every time you choose courage without pretending fear does not exist, you return. Every time you make space for your authentic thoughts, you return. And slowly you begin to feel something that cannot be manufactured by applause, a sense of inner alignment. Your life may not suddenly become perfect, but you become less divided against yourself. You stop fighting the person you are while trying to become the person you think you should be. You begin asking a different question. Not, how can I become worthy, but, how can I express the worth that already exists within me through the way I live? That question carries a different energy. You no longer build your life as a performance, you build it as an expression. You work because you value contribution, you learn because you value growth, you love because connection matters. You create because something inside you wants to exist in the world, you rest because your humanity matters. You set boundaries because your attention matters. You pursue dreams because curiosity matters. You help others because compassion matters. You become responsible because freedom matters. And suddenly, self-belief is no longer a slogan. It becomes a way of living. It becomes the quiet decision to keep meeting yourself honestly. It becomes the willingness to stand at the edge of uncertainty and say, I don't know exactly what is waiting for me, but I am willing to find out. That willingness is powerful, because your life will continue presenting moments that challenge your old identity. You will encounter opportunities that require courage. You will encounter setbacks that require patience. You will encounter relationships that require emotional intelligence. You will encounter choices that require values. You will encounter moments when the easiest option is not the most meaningful one. And each moment will ask the same quiet question. Who are you choosing to become? Not who were you yesterday. Not who does someone else expect you to be. Not who would make everyone comfortable. Who are you choosing to become now? You do not answer that question once. You answer it through your habits, through your conversations, through your attention, through your boundaries, through your work, through your relationships, through what you do when nobody is watching. And the more consciously you answer it, the less mysterious your potential becomes. You begin to realize that hidden power was never about becoming invincible. It was about becoming integrated, knowing your strengths without becoming arrogant, knowing your weaknesses without becoming ashamed, knowing your emotions without being controlled by them, knowing your values without forcing them upon everyone else, knowing your dreams without believing you are entitled to their outcome, knowing your limits without using them as excuses, knowing your history without allowing it to dictate your future. That is maturity, and maturity creates a different kind of confidence, a quieter confidence, a confidence that does not need to announce itself, a confidence that can sit in a room without needing to dominate it, a confidence that can say I was wrong, a confidence that can say I need help, a confidence that can say I don't know, a confidence that can say this matters to me, a confidence that can say no, a confidence that can say yes, a confidence that can say I am still learning. And perhaps you are closer to that version of yourself than you think. Maybe the transformation has already begun. Maybe the restlessness you feel is not evidence that something is wrong with you. Maybe it is the discomfort of realizing that an old identity no longer fits. Maybe the questions you keep asking are not signs of confusion. Maybe they are signs of consciousness expanding. Maybe the desire for something more is not greed. Maybe it is your mind asking for a life that feels more aligned. Maybe the quiet dissatisfaction you have felt is not asking you to destroy your life. Maybe it is asking you to listen. Listen to what energizes you. Listen to what repeatedly captures your curiosity. Listen to what you keep postponing. Listen to the values you keep compromising. Listen to the conversations you keep avoiding. Listen to the part of you that knows you are capable of more honesty. Not necessarily more achievement, more honesty. Because a meaningful life is not measured only by how much you accomplish. It is measured by how consciously you inhabit the life you have. You can achieve everything you once wanted and still feel disconnected if you never learned how to live from within. And you can live simply while experiencing profound meaning if your actions reflect what genuinely matters to you. So stop waiting for a dramatic sign that you are capable. Look at the small evidence already around you. You are still learning. You are still asking questions. You are still capable of changing. You are still capable of imagining. You are still capable of choosing. You are still capable of beginning. That is enough to start. The hidden power inside you does not need to be awakened by some extraordinary event. It can be awakened by an ordinary decision made consciously. Today, choose one thing you have been avoiding because you do not feel ready. Not something reckless, not something that ignores reality, something meaningful and manageable. Take one step, then another. Let the experience teach you. Let your confidence grow from evidence rather than fantasy. Let your self-belief become something you earn through the relationship you build with yourself. And when doubt appears, do not panic. Doubt is allowed to sit beside you. You do not have to fight every doubtful thought. You can simply say, I hear you, but you are not making this decision alone. Then, return to your values. Return to the next step. Return to the life you are trying to build. Because the goal is not to silence every uncertain voice inside your mind. The goal is to become wise enough to know which voice deserves your attention. There is a part of you that wants comfort. There is a part that wants approval. There is a part that wants certainty. There is a part that wants to avoid embarrassment. And there is another part that wants to grow. You do not have to destroy the fearful parts. You can understand them, you can reassure them, and you can still move. That is courage. Courage is not the absence of inner conflict. It is the ability to act with awareness while conflict exists. So when you stand before the next chapter of your life, do not demand that you feel completely fearless. Ask something more useful. Can I take the next honest step? If the answer is yes, take it. Then ask again and again, because a life is not transformed by one enormous decision alone. It is transformed through thousands of small moments in which you choose awareness over autopilot, responsibility over helplessness, curiosity over assumption, self-respect over approval, and courage over avoidance. Those moments accumulate. They become habits. Habits become character. Character influences choices. Choices shape direction. And direction repeated over time becomes a life. So believe in yourself, not because you are guaranteed an easy future, but because you are capable of participating consciously in whatever future you build. Believe in yourself enough to learn. Believe in yourself enough to begin. Believe in yourself enough to make mistakes. Believe in yourself enough to apologize. Believe in yourself enough to change. Believe in yourself enough to rest. Believe in yourself enough to dream. Believe in yourself enough to question old beliefs. Believe in yourself enough to stop measuring your worth against someone else's timeline. Believe in yourself enough to recognize that your life does not have to look like anyone else's to be meaningful. And when you finally stop waiting for someone outside yourself to confirm that you are capable, something shifts. Not because you suddenly become perfect, not because every fear disappears, not because the world becomes easier, but because you begin standing beside yourself. You become the person who says, I will not abandon myself simply because the path is uncertain. You become the person who says, I can face what I need to learn. You become the person who says, I can grow without hating who I was. You become the person who says, I can dream without demanding guarantees. You become the person who says, I can move forward without knowing everything. And perhaps that is where the hidden power begins to reveal itself, not as something loud or supernatural, but as the quiet strength of a human being who has finally stopped asking the world for permission to become fully alive.